All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Blake Hoogeveen with BetterCulture, and just want to say thank you to everyone who's joining us today to hear a little bit about what we think on this topic of what every company should know about employee engagement surveys. Just to give a little bit of stage setting today and tell you what I'm going to talk about, I want to start with something that I believe really strongly, which is no employee engagement survey is perfect. The best option depends on what your goals are. So I'm going to introduce three different goals that I think organizations have for using employee engagement surveys. And based on your goals, I think you will choose a different survey. I've been in the employee engagement survey business for a little over a decade. We do offer an employee engagement survey with BetterCulture. And through that experience of building it and working with a lot of different organizations, I've learned a lot about surveys. So I'm going to use some examples from our survey, but again, I refer to number one, no survey is perfect. Our survey might not be appropriate for your goals. And I am an expert in our survey, but not necessarily an expert in other vendors and other surveys. So I'm going to tell you about some options to consider, but I'm not going to use other vendors by name just because I'm not an expert. So not endorsing our survey for everyone. It's not a fit for every organization, but I'm just going to use it to give you examples to help you determine what type of survey you should use as you're considering launching an employee engagement survey. And finally, the part that I want to spend the most time on today is how to ultimately maximize the value of your employee engagement survey. After a decade of experience working with a lot of organizations to launch and ultimately get value out of an employee engagement survey, I've come to realize that there are a lot of scars in organizations from trying to launch an employee engagement survey and ultimately not having it really achieve the amount of success that they envisioned when they started it. So I've ultimately come to believe what you ultimately choose in terms of the type of survey or the vendor you use is not nearly as important for overall success as what you do to execute the survey. Execute in terms of announcing it to your team, and also how do you get good participation when the survey's open, and finally that important follow-up. Taking a look at the results and determining what are our next steps. We got employee input and feedback. How do we move forward in a way that ultimately leads our organization to greater success? I want to tell you quickly our story with BetterCulture. If you don't know it, I think it gives a little context to what I'm going to share today. Overall, our mission is to improve business performance by upskilling leaders and improving company culture. Put simply, we believe better culture leads to better business. Our start was really a few decades ago at this organization in Omaha, Nebraska called QLI. After it was recognized 5 times as the #1 best place to work in Omaha, QLI's founder responded to other business leaders who were asking the question, what are you doing to build your culture? Ultimately, he launched a training, consulting, coaching, and assessment business called Mindset to respond to those questions, asking, what are you doing at QLI to build that unrivaled work culture? And for over a decade now, we have worked with organizations, largely going in person and delivering training, consulting, coaching, and assessments to help them improve their employee development and ultimately create a better company culture. Then in 2020, largely in part due to COVID, that was very tough on the Mindset in-person business. We had time to rethink what could we do through technology, digital offerings, to help organizations develop their own people and build their own culture using our intellectual capital. So instead of us going into organizations with better culture, we're building products and resources to empower organizations to develop their own people and build their culture thanks to our support. So with that, I want to launch a poll. I'd like to get a little bit of a pulse on your experience if you're joining this webinar here today. Get your opinion on if your organization has offered an employee engagement survey in the past. It could be where you're currently working, maybe at a past employer. How has that gone? I'm curious just to see what you think from that experience. Has the survey gone well, both launching it as well as follow-up? I would just like to get a sense of folks joining, what you overall think. I have found a pretty wide array from some folks saying it goes really well and others saying, wow, we could have done a whole lot better. So I'll give you about 10 more seconds to respond, share the results, and then we will keep on moving here today. All right, thank you for the feedback here. Awesome. So just quickly here, I'm going to share results. We have the largest percentage of people have a neutral response, a little over 50%, and then we have about 10% for strongly agree and agree, and then about 20% for those who disagree with that. Now that probably matches what I have seen in the market, the organizations that we work with. I'd just like to get a little bit of feedback too. If you think it didn't go well, or you just think your survey could have been more successful if you did something different, I'd love to see any comments that you have in the chat, just sharing what do you think would have made that survey go even better. That will be helpful for me just as I continue to offer thoughts to help you and your organization move forward with employee engagement surveys. And I would also like this session to be as interactive as possible. If you have any comments, any questions, my colleague Stevie, who leads marketing and a lot of our content, is here as well, responding to your questions, as well as flagging me when there's interesting comments or questions in the chat. So thanks again for being here, and I will move on to the session here today. My goals are to give you a little bit of background on employee engagement surveys, share those 3 reasons why I think you should consider using a survey, explain how to pick the best vendor if you're going to go that direction, and then ultimately discuss what are the best practices to maximize the value of using a survey. So let's start with some history. Up on the screen, here is aggregate employee engagement data that's been collected by Gallup and published by Gallup that shows you starting in about the year 2000, companies started to really care about looking at employee engagement data. They knew the more engaged our employees, the more valuable our employees, the more successful we're likely to be as an organization. And they realized using an anonymous survey was a great way to test the pulse of the organization. And I think the good thing is, if you look at the blue line, that's the percentage of American workers across the United States who are engaged at their work. So starting in 2000, that percentage was 26, and you can see in 2022, it increased to 32%. Overall, the trend is going up, but I think it also shows we have a lot of work to do to improve the level of engagement. Over 2 decades of work and focus looking at employee engagement data, we've improved, but there's a whole lot more improvement that could be had. And similarly, if you look at the percentage of employees who are actively disengaged at work, that has remained somewhat consistent from 15 to 20% over the last 2 decades. Stevie's looking at me and saying, actually, Blake, if you look at the data, it dropped below 15%, a few points there. I do see that. Thank you, Stevie, keeping me on track here. So why should you survey? Here are 3 common reasons that organizations consider using a survey. Number 1, it's valuable to have an award or have a seal to be able to publish to the world that your company has a good culture. Our people like working for us. It's a signal to customers that we have an engaged employee base, so come buy our service or buy our products. In general, the more engaged employees are, the better the product or service is going to be to the market. So companies have realized, hey, this is valuable. If we could earn the acclaim of being a good place to work, I think that'll help our business be more profitable. Similarly, especially today, everyone who's in hiring and HR knows it's a war for talent. And if we can signal to the market, we offer our employees a great place to work, we're going to be more successful at recruiting and retaining talent. In this case, if they're using it for marketing or recruiting reasons, oftentimes somebody from the marketing department is leading the survey, and their primary goal is to get an award or a seal that they can publish to the world to help them show we're a great place to work. We care about our employees, and we take care of our employees, they're more likely to be engaged. Number 2, the company is really working on initiatives to become a better place to work. And they want data to be able to monitor, are we making progress? Let's say a company gets a new leader, and the leader wants to really put some initiatives to become a better place to work. They could ask one simple question if they wanted to, just out to their employees. Do you believe our company is a good place to work? And if that's the only data they collect, they can at least have something objective in terms of feedback from employees. Year over year, they could look at that one question. Most of the time, it's going to be more than one question. It could be a simple 5-question survey. It could be a 12-question survey. But if you just want data, largely you're looking for a simple survey, might take your employees 3 to 5 minutes to complete. And that helps you determine, are we going in the right direction as you got baseline data in year 1, and then you resurvey every year, or possibly more frequently with pulse surveys that just simply give you that pulse of what do our employees think in terms of the progress we're making. The final reason you survey, I think, is the most popular reason, which is we genuinely want to know what our employees think. We genuinely want to find opportunities to make our organization even better. So we're going to look at a lot of different factors, a lot of different information. And once we get all the feedback from our employees, we're going to try and figure out how can we make our organization an even better place to work? How can we treat our employees in a way that would make them more likely to recommend our organization as a great place to work? And with BetterCulture, this is really our specialty. Our survey is designed to provide actionable information that helps organizations get a deep look into what is the overall company culture that we have, and where do we have opportunities to improve. That's our specialty. For organizations that are looking more for marketing or recruiting support or simple baseline data, we don't have the best solution for them. They would want to look for more of a technology company or more of a company that specializes in recognizing great places to work. When we work with organizations, just to tie that to our overall work, I found that a lot of companies want to have a better company culture, but they don't necessarily have clarity on what's a simple process that our organization could use to take the next step toward building a better culture. I've shared this with a lot of people and they like it, so I'm just going to mention it here, regardless of which survey you use. I think these 4 steps are helpful. Step number 1, have you taken time to envision what's the culture we want to offer to our employees? If you haven't taken the time to envision the culture you want, you're unlikely to ever be able to achieve it. Step number 2, this is where engagement surveys come in. You need to assess what's your current company culture. Once you do step 1 and step 2, step 3 is put a plan in place to get from where you are to get to where you want to be. And then step number 4 is simply execute the plan. Again, envision where you want to be, assess where you are, put a strategic plan in place that allows you to have some deliverables in terms of moving forward with making progress from where you are to where you want to be, and then being diligent to actually execute the plan over the next 6 to 12 months. So back to my goals for today. I think I've checked the box on the first 2. And now we're going to lead into some thoughts on if I were giving advice on how to select the right survey for your organization. Here are some thoughts to consider. Number 1, there's 2 tracks. You can do it yourself, or you can hire a survey vendor. And I think there's really one reason to do a survey yourself. It comes down to budget. And this is simply, you want some data, you want to do a survey to collect some information to better understand what's the morale of our team. If you don't have a budget, there's ways that you can do a survey completely for free. And I think that is an option for some organizations. But with the rise of technology, I think there's increasingly a lot of reasons that you should not do an employee engagement survey on your own. There are a lot of really cost-effective vendors using technology. You will be, I think, happier and you'll be more successful if you look at a low-cost option with a technology company. If you're going to consider picking a vendor, I think you do it for these reasons. Number 1, you'll save a lot of time. Running an employee engagement survey is complicated. All the steps of figuring out the questions, figuring out how to launch it to your team, figuring out how to ultimately crunch the data, build a report, interpret the report and data. Bottom line, if you have a ton of time and you want to figure it out yourself, go for it. But I think there's a lot of reason to pick a vendor for saving time. Number 2, you get access to expertise and customer service that makes your life a lot better. And finally, there are a lot of scars out there from employees that say, my company, I think, had good intentions with doing a survey on their own, but ultimately we didn't do a good job of assuring anonymity for employees. And that led to a lot of lost trust and quite a bit of harm to our organization when we tried to do it on our own. So those would be my recommendations, or at least the reasons that it's valuable to consider a vendor. If you're going to use a survey vendor, here would be some questions that I would encourage you to ask. Number 1, would you consider giving me a money-back guarantee? We've worked with a lot of organizations on employee engagement surveys, and I've got to tell you, I've found a lot more people out in different companies that have had a lousy experience than a great service. And I'm not sure they will give it to you, but I found a ton of vendors that'll tell you up front, we're great. And if they really are great, ask them for a money-back guarantee, because I think that could give a little bit more insight into, will they stand behind the sales messaging and the marketing messaging that they're using with the survey. Number 2, a lot of vendors are going to ask you to commit to a multi-year survey. And ultimately, I think it's helpful to ask them, if you require or want a multi-year commitment, can we make it an option instead of a requirement? Meaning, I'm happy to commit to running a survey multiple years, but I just want it to be an option. This is something that we offer. We'll give you a money-back guarantee, and we don't lock you into a long-term commitment. We want to offer great service. We want to offer great value. And We hope to earn your trust and earn your business over multiple years. But if we don't live up to your expectations, we want you to go find a different vendor if we're not the right fit. And we also understand over 3 to 5 years, things can change. And it might not make sense to be locked in to a survey for that amount of time. So I would encourage you to ask for it. They might honor it, they might not, but it can't hurt to ask. Number 3, this is a big one. Can we launch the survey on the timeline that we want to? A lot of survey providers have a lot of companies that they're working with, and they're trying to make sure that they can launch the survey on a timeline that they can support. I've received quite a bit of feedback that the organization ultimately isn't able to launch the survey on the timeline that they want to. And I think that can be a big deal based on what you have. So making sure that you can launch on the timeline that makes sense. Speaking of timeline, ask, when am I going to actually get results in hand? We're doing a survey because we want the data, we want the survey report, we want to be able to move forward. Again, I have heard more and more examples of overpromise and underdeliver, with some HR executives telling me, we were promised we'd get a report in 1 month and we don't get it for 3 to 4 months. So again, just my recommendation, if they tell you that you're going to have it on a certain timeline, say, awesome, let's add it to the contract. Put a guarantee in there. I think that'll help you get better service, and it might help you ultimately be a lot happier with the vendor you choose. And then, can you edit their questions? Can you add custom questions? Most vendors will be very flexible and happy to work with you to allow you to customize the survey, add special questions if their core questions don't cover everything that you want to know. I think if you're going to be offering an employee engagement survey, you're already asking your people to take time to respond to questions. It's the perfect time to add additional select questions if you're already running a survey. And then finally, I think you'll obviously want to see an example of a survey report. That's ultimately the deliverable that you're going to receive. So take a close look at that and just ask yourself, is that going to be actionable? Will it help me accomplish the goals that I want to achieve by running a survey? So with that, here is what we decided would be good to show in a survey report. Again, this is just what we believe to be helpful. Showing you this just so you can consider, do we have these options in the survey that we're using, or could we have these options if we're working with a company to help us with an employee engagement survey? So here's a sample report. Number one, we like to be able to show data across a number of different demographic splits, from gender to age to tenure to compensation to employment status. We think it's interesting to be able to provide this data, ultimately showing who completed your survey, and then being able to break down the results across those different demographics, because it can be really helpful to see, do different groups of people view our company in different ways, or is it more consistent that all employees see our organization in a similar way? Secondly, are you able to compare your average results to other organizations? So here, our survey is 49 questions. You see the listing, question 1 to question 49 on the x-axis at the bottom. You can see your organization's scores would be in blue. We contrast that with the average organization in red. And then after we started doing our survey, it was clear that it was easier to score high on some questions than others. And we had a lot of our companies say, what's the best score you've ever seen from any company on each question? So we added that. We consider that to be our peak scores. So this is kind of the one image is worth 1,000 words. This is our summary that quickly shows organizations. How do you compare to the average company on all 49 items? We then show the data in a different way. This is a summary graph that a lot of organizations share with their board of directors, key stakeholders, sometimes all employees. It presents the data in a simple one-page way, just showing how do we compare as an organization to just the average company. So again, your score is in blue, the average company in red, comparing across the 14 different factors that we're measuring with our survey. Ultimately, since we were looking to help organizations really find opportunities for growth, we reverse engineered our survey saying, what would we want to know if we wanted to help an organization become a better place to work? And ultimately, the areas that we wanted to know from offering training and consulting were, what's the level of pride the organization has? Do employees have a chance to have input? What do they think of top leaders? What do they think of their immediate supervisor? Do they feel appreciated? What do they think of their work environment, etc.? Those are all distinct areas that we thought with focus and effort, we can help organizations improve. Next, it's important to be able to see your overall company data of how do our employees on average feel about working here. And it's also important to be able to see how do unique groups of people within our company feel about working here. So we give organizations the chance to say, hey, do you have unique offices? Would you like to see those broken out? Do you have different divisions? Would you like to see those broken out? So you can see for our 14 different factors and 7 principles that are really tied to our business, helping organizations train their leaders on 7 different key leadership principles, we're giving unique data comparing those unique divisions using a heat mapping system where anything showing up in green is saying, compared to your organization as a whole, this organization or this area of the company is healthier. And then anything in red or pink would be saying, compared to the organization as a whole, these teams or areas of the company are scoring below average, helping that really jump off the page to get a quick view into what parts of the company are healthiest and which have the greatest room to improve. We do the same heat mapping analysis across all 49 questions. We do the same heat mapping analysis back to that demographic overview mentioned, showing the data across tenure, gender, age, compensation type, and employment. And then finally, we like to give a look at what's the distribution of responses. Our survey is a 9-point survey. 1 represents the strongly disagree, a 9 represents the strongly agree, a 5 would be neutral. And we give this data showing what's the percentage of responses for every question across every different team or division that you want to measure. So you can see here, if you look at question 6, for the most part, every employee agrees to the answer to that question. A 5 would be a neutral response. You can see maybe 4 to 5% of employees were neutral, and then everything else is shifting up and to the right. Again, a 9 is a strongly agree. So 6 would be somewhat agree, 7 agree, 8, yeah, pretty strongly agree, and 9 would be strongly agree. Contrast that, if you look down in the bottom right, you see question number 25, and you can see a flatter distribution there saying there's a lot of disagreement on that question. So it quickly just allows you to see how uniform do employees feel, or is there a pretty wide disagreement? We think that is very helpful to show. And ultimately, I'm an actuary by background. I have found a lot of people don't like technical terms like variance and standard deviation. That's why we use these histograms or pictures that really make that a lot more clear, showing what's the overall data and distribution. So in the chat, Stevie just shared, if you want to take a look at our survey, you can see that in the chat, a link. I want to transition to ultimately talking about, so what? What if we do a survey? How do we follow up? And here's our recommendation of best practices. Number one, if you're going to ask your employees to give you their input, you need to be committed to sharing results with employees. One way to frustrate your people is launch an employee engagement survey and then never tell them or say anything about it going forward. We recommend that you share custom information with different audiences. Your executive team will have insight into probably the entire report, and you'll be working with the executive team to plan how do we want to follow up after we get to see data. You bring your managers under the tent, sharing them a lot of information, asking for their support, rolling out the next steps following the survey, and ultimately asking them for their support to take key messages to every employee. So we show we appreciate your feedback. We did listen. We put a lot of work into considering how do we make our organization even stronger. And here is where we're going to proceed. I think that you can make the survey follow-up a lot more complicated than it actually needs to be. We recommend a two-step process. After you do the survey, and as you look at the survey results, we encourage you to find 2 to 3 strengths that you can see in the data and communicate them to your employees and celebrate those strengths that you have. We launched an employee engagement survey. We collected all the data. Here were 2 or 3 themes that we saw from all of you that we think we should feel good about and celebrate. Those are our strengths. And it's important to take time to celebrate what we should all feel good about. And then number 2, identify 2 to 3 opportunities for growth that you see in the survey results. And then create a plan, and that plan could be executed over 3 to 12 months to help make your organization more successful, a better place to work, help communicate better, help listen better and give employees a chance to have input, invest in leadership development, etc. There could be lots of things that you see to actually improve. Oftentimes, our recommendation is whoever led the survey, who's ever accountable for the survey follow-up, spend time with the executive team or a key group of people and identify what are those 2 to 3 opportunities for growth that we should lean into. And then let's communicate our 2 to 3 strengths that we saw from the survey results and 2 to 3 themes that we saw as big opportunities for growth that we're going to be leaning into and asking you for your support, every employee, to help us move forward as an organization. I think this same theme can be done at the team level. If you have good managers that are skilled at facilitating really good conversation with their team, when you get the survey results, you'll be able to share some information at the team level, and being able to have this conversation, possibly getting employees to share 2 to 3 things that they think are really great about the organization or team, and maybe identify 2 to 3 opportunities for growth that the team would work on. I think that can really get people engaged and look forward to progress within the organization. One of the stumbling blocks that we see for survey follow-up happens when organizations get survey results. I think sometimes it's so much information that they have the best of intentions with communicating results to employees, putting a plan in place, and acting on the plan, but it's like they just get paralyzed or they get so slowed down in all the details, and then they get busy with other things that are going on in the business, and they never come back to the survey results, which leads to that frustrating position that employees feel like, hey, I was excited. They asked me for my feedback. I took time to give my feedback, and then I never heard anything. Nothing ever happened. No communication was shared. No plan was made. We didn't really do anything, and that ultimately leads to a lot more harm than not doing a survey at all. So just a warning, if you're not planning to put a plan in place, communicate results, move forward, you're wise not to do a survey at all. So in the chat, Stevie has shared just some resources. If you want to download this, it's just our tips for top executives, and then some thoughts for managers that help you better take whatever survey results you receive. Here are some ideas that'll help you move forward and better handle that next follow-up step of actually moving forward with the data. Finally, before opening it up to Q&A here, I just want to share 2 resources that we offer to organizations that help them launch an initiative after doing a survey. And if you haven't ever heard this, if you want to launch a new initiative, you might consider launching an employee engagement survey first, because it's the perfect springboard to announce a new initiative to employees after asking for their feedback, getting the data. The data is likely going to support your initiative, and that can be a great launching point to share with employees. Thanks for taking time to give us your feedback. We took your feedback. Now we have an exciting initiative to offer. For example, developing employees is natural coming from any employee engagement survey. We have 2 products that help organizations develop employees. One is focused more on developing leaders or managers. We consider that top down. And then the other product we call 20 Tenets of Culture. That's focused on what can every employee do to become better here for our company, more successful at work and in life, and support the organization at the front lines. So very quickly, if you would have any interest in this, again, we have organizations that don't use our survey that still use these 2 products. You can use one, you can use both. Just highlight them very quickly, since I think the main pain point that organizations have following a survey is finding out what's that momentum? What are we going to invest in to help our organization improve? And across the board, the better your leaders are, the better your culture is going to be in the future. So we have an on-demand leadership program. It's 56 brief videos, on average about 3 minutes in length. The entire program takes about 3 hours to get through. The program is built around what we believe leaders need to know and do to actually build and protect a healthy workplace culture. Those principles focus on things like understanding culture, knowing how to build pride, understanding how to grow people, helping them be successful at work and in life. How do you protect standards? How do you make decisions in a way that lead to good decisions and creating a better company culture? How do we eliminate destructive conflict? And finally, how do we have some fun and enjoyment at work? It's a program that you can launch to develop leaders either on demand on their own, or what most companies do is they launch cohort groups and put 8 to 15 people through this program at the exact same time. Maybe they wanted to develop their leaders, but they didn't have the content and resources to do so. So we have the content, we have the program, we give everyone a chance to use the digital study guide, or you can buy this on Amazon to support the program. And then who's ever going to lead that discussion, they have access to a facilitator's guide, and you can go from having no leadership program to having an exceptional leadership program in just a few weeks' time by taking what we built and running with it, as long as you have somebody who's a great facilitator and who would help hold people accountable to going through that leadership program. The other one that we have, we call 20 Tenets of Culture, and put simply, it focuses on how do we help our employees be more successful? How do we help our teams be more cohesive? And how do we win the war for talent by activating every employee who wants to help us build and protect a better workplace culture? Founder of our organization, Dr. Kim Hoogeveen, says, culture is essentially the attitudes and behaviors we come to expect from each other. And if you want a better company culture, you first need to identify, and then you need to influence those desired employee behaviors. And that's what we do with this product. We have 20 attitudes or behaviors that we take employees through a self-assessment where they get to rate themselves from I'm lousy to I'm amazing at those tenets when I show up to work each and every day. And then we help organizations have discussion and meaningful conversation to help them develop individual employees, help teams be more cohesive and effective, and help the organization have a better company culture by, again, inviting everyone to participate. This is something we really missed for a decade with the work that we did. We were simply focused on what can owners, what can CEOs, what can executive teams, what can leaders, what can managers do to build and protect culture? And we were missing the opportunity to reach out to your star employees that aren't in leadership roles and say, this is what you could do to work on developing yourself. And at the same time, if you would help bring these attitudes and behaviors to life on your team, you'll be doing us a huge favor in helping to build a better organizational culture. So that's what we get to do. We have that software product that allows you to help employees do a self-assessment and then get coaching for a year. And there's lots of ways to have meaningful conversation around those tenets. So with that, that's what I think every organization should know about employee engagement surveys. If anybody has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. I'm going to go back and see any questions that were typed that I missed as I was running through that information. I see one question asking about pulse surveys. I didn't mention this. Pulse surveys are essentially a way that you can launch a survey anytime. A lot of companies that offer a technology solution to running a survey, they do it annually, and then they give you the chance to launch a survey at any time just to check the pulse for any question you want to. They're typically short and concise, and they allow organizations to get on-demand feedback on the information that they want to anytime. So that's not something that we offer, but we have a number of our companies that utilize pulse surveys, and I think it's a great opportunity just to keep the pulse of the organization as you move forward. Sorry, didn't mean to move that. Any other questions? See one question about the leadership program. We really built that thinking that there was a big market of just people that wanted to learn leadership on demand. And we've kind of subsequently realized that wasn't the reason to build that program. The reason was a lot of organizations want better leaders. They just didn't have the content, and they didn't have a system to make it simple and easy to offer leadership training to groups of people. So we've had organizations grab that program and use it to start a leadership program. Could be for rising star employees, could be for mid-level leaders. We've even had executive teams that are looking to grow say, we're always looking for just content to spur good conversation. We would like to use it for that reason. So we found lots of different applications for the content. So if you're looking to push your leaders or looking to develop your people, whether you have an existing program, you just want to supplement it. We have a number of organizations that say, we've been offering an annual leadership development group for 10 years. We have so many graduates from the program that are eager for additional content. And this was a great way to invest in some of our most eager, optimistic, growth-oriented leaders. So that is a way, and other organizations just didn't know where to start. They wanted to launch a program. Any other questions here? One question about, do we recommend any certain timeline for running surveys multiple years? So a lot of organizations will run a survey annually or they'll run it every 2 years. I don't have a strong opinion. I think that if it's not a pain to run a survey, I like doing an annual survey. I think it's frequent enough to get good data to allow you to have information to move forward. And it's not so frequent that you're going to annoy your employees. There are some vendors that might suggest you should survey every 6 months. I think you're going to wear your people out. It's not giving you enough time to analyze the data, put a plan in place, and act on it. So for that reason, we even have some of our companies that use our survey. They run it every 2 years, every 3 years, or every 18 months. I think that covers all the questions that I see. I will pause 30 more seconds, see if anybody else has any questions. All right, well, if you think of any questions that you wish you would have asked or you want me to respond to, you're welcome to email me at blake@betterculture.com or give me a call. That's my cell phone number. Feel free to give me a call if you have any questions, 402-630-6500. I appreciate your time. Hopefully everyone took something that was helpful from this session, and I wish you the best of your day here. Thanks so much.